Hi, well we're back out in the garage again. Still kind of cool. I think you can probably hear the furnace humming away in the background. And we're going to work on the old Yamaha today. They're doing a little tune-up on that. There's some things that I have done quite recently to it, but I'm just going to check everything over. It's spring. I might as well make sure everything's ready for the coming season. But before I get started, there's just a little something I wanted to share with you. And that is this cardboard. Now you can see the top of my bench. I did retop that bench with plywood, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, and it took about 6 months for it to look like that. So anyway, my wife discovered something while out shopping. And this is a half a piece actually of cardboard that comes on pallets, like between toilet paper rolls at the big box stores like Costco and places like that, Walmart, that sort of thing. These are left over from the shipping process, and the store just throws them away. So if you want some of that cardboard, they'll give it to you for free, and it's terrific for covering the bench. So yeah, I just cut a piece out to cover that dirty patch there. Push it into place. Kind of hard to do this with one hand. Throw a couple of them throwing axe heads on there. Lift that up. Push it in place, and there. I got a nice clean surface to work on without wasting a perfectly good rag or anything. So I just thought I'd share that with you. But getting back to the Yamaha, the first thing you want to do when you're doing a tune-up on these, at least according to the book, is to adjust the cam chain. I don't know, I'm going around the other side just because I think it's easier to see over there. Yeah, the hose for the breather isn't in the way over here. So on this particular model, and they're all pretty much the same, you just take this big cap off of here. The later ones, the cap was smaller, but what you're going to find under there is an adjustment screw with a hex head on it and a rod inside of it. And what you do is you place the rod evenly with the surface of the adjustment screw. That pre-tensions your timing chain. So, and then you just set everything up, put the cover back on, and the timing chain is done. But to do that, you roll the engine over with the Kickstarter, and when that plunger is at its furthest point in, that's where you adjust the big bolt that's inside. But I'm gonna take that cover off and just show you what's in there, so you can see that. Okay, I've taken the cover off the adjuster assembly here. This is where the cover screws on these threads. This is the lock nut that holds this adjuster in place. So there is the cover right there. The later models don't have a big cover like this. They just have a little acorn nut that kind of goes on over the adjuster bolt there, and just becomes part of the lock nut assembly basically. But anyway, excuse me, what you can see is I have the spark plugs out. That's because I'm going to rotate the engine, and of course it's going to be a lot easier with the plugs out. So I'm going to move the camera back a little bit, try to keep you sort of in there where you need to be. And then I'm going to try to keep myself out of the way, but put my hand on the Kickstarter there, and I'm going to roll the engine over, and I'm going to feel the little adjuster rod that's inside of that lock bolt. And if everything is okay, that little rod should be absolutely flush with the tip of that little lock nut there when it's in at its deepest point. So you don't push on it with anything. You let the spring do the job, but I'm going to reach in there with my finger on the back of that, And then I'm going to roll the engine over with the Kickstarter. And feel that little rod till it's at the point where it is the furthest in. That way I know that I'm actually opening a valve and the tension is on the front side of the chain and not the back. So anyway, that is perfect. I don't need to adjust this because the little rod in there is exactly flush with that adjuster bolt right there. So I'm just going to wipe the oil off of that stuff, put that cover back on, and then I can proceed with the ignition timing. Oh, by the way, just to prove, take a look at that. I think the camera will focus on it. That's one of the plugs. But, that color is perfect. The engine was running beautifully anyway, but hey, it doesn't hurt to check, especially in the springtime. Check your timing and make sure it's right. And that way you'll have a whole season of driving around without any problems. So I will put that cover back on. I'm not going to change the O-ring on it because that O-ring was just put in there last year and it's still got plenty of squish left in it. So I'm just going to, like I said, wipe the oil off, put that cover back on the back in its place there, and then I'll go over to the left side of the bike and we'll start having a look at the timing. Make sure that's okay. Now, before I go over to the left side to check the points, I thought I would just show you what's over here on the right side. This is the timing advance for the Yamaha 650. You can see it's just two flyweights here. When the engine speeds up, the flyweights overcome the spring tension, and we'll go to full advance like that. And when it does, it rotates this little shaft in the middle. That shaft in the middle goes right through a set of bushings, right through to the other side. And that's the other side is where the points live, and the timing cam is over there. So here's your advance on over here, and the other stuff's on the other side. A lot of bikes would put the ignition cam on this side and then the points over this timing advance. But these guys, they wanted to make both sides of the engine look the same, I think. So what they did was put a nice chrome cover on this side. They put the timing advance here, and then the other side they put the points in. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that. Now we'll go over to the other side. I'm going to pick you up here and try not to jiggle you around too much. All right, let's get you over this way. Set you down. And there are the ignition points. And by the way, these ignition points are the ones that came with the bike. I just clean them up once every 2 years or so, really, and lube them, put them back into service. You know, by lubing them, I mean making sure that these little felt wicks have a drop of oil on them, and there might be a drop of oil right here in the pivot point for the points. But anyway, let me get my stool over here and we'll get started on this. Okay, let's get started with this now. I think I've got you zoomed in here pretty good. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is slide that little piece of garnet paper. That's a piece of, what is it, 240 garnet paper that I've just folded over and glued together. That's great for cleaning these points. I don't like using carborundum or anything like that because it tends to stick in the metal of the points, and you got to really make sure you've got all the carborundum out of there before you try to start the bike, or you won't even get a spark out of it. But I find that garnet doesn't tend to stick to the metal, so that's what I use for cleaning points. So right now I have the engine rotated over, and by the way, you can see that I've removed that cover from there so that I can rotate the engine easily from this side. That's a cover I made for that. I wonder if anybody's going to notice that or not. Anyway, you just put a 17 millimeter on there. Be careful not to damage the brush holder or anything like that while you're working at it. But yeah, just rotate it at this time until the points are closed, because you want the points to be closed when you're cleaning them. That way there's a little bit of spring tension there. So I'm just going to open the points a little tiny bit with a screwdriver so I can get that little piece of paper in there like that. And then I'm just going to pull that little piece of sandpaper in and out between those points until it comes out clean. So let's get started with that then. Sorry, my hand's in the way, but yeah, I'm gonna pull, push, pull, push. You might have to relieve some of that spring pressure to get the sandpaper back in there. Let's just pull it out with the spring pressure, holding them together. And they feel pretty good. Sometimes you get a little mountain on one of the points, and that indicates that you've got a condenser that's not quite what it should be. It's not absorbing enough of the electrons, and when they jump, they take some metal with them, right? Kind of welded to the other side, but I do not think that I can feel any kind of anything in there except a good flat set of points. So let me have a look. Not much on that paper. Let me just, you can see there's not a lot on there. I'm just going to grab my old trusty little stick flashlight here and have a little look between the points and see what they look like. You got to get in there really close to do this. And I'm sorry you probably can't see much with this bright light in there, but yeah, those points look good. Now all I'm going to do is get a little piece of cardboard and drag it back between the points again to make sure I remove any kind of leftover garnet from the points themselves. So here's a nice little piece of that thin cardboard that's on my workbench. Right, I'm going to slip that in there now. Pull that back and forth between there until it comes out clean. That's good. Okay, that should form good contact. Now I'm going to rotate the engine 180 degrees up here and do this other set of points. I won't put you through watching all that, so I'm just going to stop this for now, and we'll proceed when it comes to setting the gaps. Okay, now I have set the, what am I saying? I've cleaned the points on the bottom. They're nice and clean. Had a look at them with the flashlight too, after I drug the sandpaper and the cardboard through there. So they're all set to go. Now it's time to set the gap. I find with this particular bike, some bikes are a little different. They're all a little odd from each other sometimes, but this one seems to like to be set at 12 thou. If I set it at 14, which is like the book says 12 to 16 thou. If I diddle for the middle and go with 14 thou, I tend to run out of adjustment room when it comes to setting the timing, so 12 seems to work really well with this. And what I like to do is make sure my ignition cam is in the same position when I do both of these sets of points. And there's a little keyway right up there on the ignition cam. I like to have that pointing up for one set of points and pointing down for the other one. So it's pointing up right now, straight up in the air. And I will, ever so carefully, slip that 12 thou feeler gauge in there. And that is so perfect that I'm not going to adjust that. If you need to adjust the gap, what you do is you loosen up this little screw. I'll just point at it with the tip of this feeler gauge. This little screw right here, loosen that off, put a screwdriver in here, and move the point base back and forth till you get that exact 12 thou, and it should be just a very, very, very slight drag on the feeler gauge blade. So now I'm going to rotate the engine 360 degrees, which will rotate the camshaft 180 degrees. And then I'm going to do the other set of points when that little keyway is facing straight down, right there. So let's see what we have up here on this set of points. I can just feel that 12 thou feeler just slightly dragging in between there. So that one doesn't need to be adjusted either. And again, if I did need to adjust it, it's this screw right here that you would loosen off a bit. Then you put your screwdriver. Where's the screwdriver? Right there. I'll just put it in place so you can see right there between those two pins in that slot. And you would adjust where the points plate sits on the main points plate and get your 12 thou that way. Now comes the time where we have to be picky, because this is where you set the ignition timing. Okay, it just so happens that I have not moved the engine at all, but this is exactly where I left it, with that little keyway facing straight down to adjust this set of points. And it just so happens that I am right on the F mark, which is the firing mark, which you set on idle for these bikes. So when this mark right here on the rotor is aligned right between those two marks here with the F in it, that's where your points are just supposed to open. Now, if you're using a strobe light to time these, this is where it'll fire when the engine's idling. When you rev the engine up, it'll fire here at the full advance point. And this other mark way over here by the T, that's your top center mark. So, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my little timing light with the alligator clips on it. This is not a strobe light, it's just a little instrument light that I use for static timing, and I find static timing is just as perfect as checking a strobe light. The only thing is, with the strobe you can actually make sure that you are going to full advance, but it never hurts to check with the strobe light after you get the engine running anyway. But the next thing to do, yes, I'll go get that little light and I'll show you what I do with that. Okay, let's get you zoomed back in here. I have connected the wires from my little light, which is here, and connected to one side where the lead comes in from the coil to the points, and the other side just goes to ground. The ignition switch is on right now. So what I'm going to do is just push the engine a little bit backwards, and I'll try to hold that up there so you can see it. When that light comes on, the points will be just opening, and that's exactly where you want the engine to fire. And that light just came on. Let me back it up a little bit again, and we'll bring it slowly in position till the light comes on. Then we stop. We look down here. And I don't know if you can see very well, you're still on the tripod, but that mark on the rotor right there is exactly between the F marks. So I don't need to change my timing. for that side. Now there's another thing you need to consider when you're working with these particular machines, is that the bottom plate is adjustable. The top one is adjustable too, but it adjusts the whole darn plate, right? So, let's see. Anyway, so you really should do the top one first and then do the bottom one. But I'm kind of going at it backwards here. So in any case, I don't have to do the bottom one. Let's go up and check the top one and just pray that I don't have to move anything. Because if I do, I'll have to adjust that as well. But let's see what happens. And I don't need to worry about the engine kicking because I have the spark plugs removed while I'm doing this. So I'm just going to rotate this whole thing. And by the way, the core of the crankshaft gets magnetized when you're working at these things. So it can be a little bit annoying when you're putting a wrench on the crankshaft to turn this over. But all right, we're almost there. All right, it should be right about there. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to remove that from here. I'm going to put that up here on that one. Okay. I'm just going to set that there just to see what happens when we rotate the engine a little bit more. Oh, that's a good sign. Back, forward, back. In the direction of rotation, very slowly. Until the light comes on. And oh my God, that's it. I don't have to change anything here. So the timing is perfect. It's right between the F mark where it should be. I'll just double check that again to make sure. And whoops. The camshaft wants to push the engine ahead before I want it to. Yeah, that's perfect. So ignition timing is set. I don't need to worry about it. All I'm going to do now is put a drop of oil on these wicks, a little tiny drop of oil on the pivot points there, and I'll turn the ignition off so I don't run my battery dry, and then that's it for the points. Good for another couple of 1,000 miles. Well, before I put this cover on, I have another job I want to do, but I have checked the little brushes that are in here. These are your alternator brushes. I replaced those about 30 some years ago with some brushes that I made from old Delco Remy generator brushes, and they have been in there for well over 30 years now, and they show no signs of being worn out, so they'll be good for a long while yet. They haven't worn the slip rings any worse than the standard brushes did, but as far as longevity goes, man, if you can get your hands on an old set of Delco Remy brushes and file and cut them down to shape so they'll work in there and then solder the ends on like the originals, do it, because they're way better than the originals were. But I still need to get at the crank to turn it because I am going to check the valve lash next. And if anybody's wondering what that rag's there for, well, that's so that stupid Bruce doesn't drop any little screws or nuts or anything like that down into the engine, because you don't want to do that. That would just ruin your day. But I've got the covers back on the points and back on the ignition advance on the other side after lubricating everything up. So they should be good for, like I said, a couple 1,000 more miles. And anyway, I'm going to get these covers off because I haven't checked those in a long time. All right, let's try this again. I just started, but I forgot the radio was on, so I had to go turn that off. Anyway, got all 4 of the valve covers off. You may notice that most of the valve covers have 3 studs in them, but this one here The exhaust on the left-hand side has 4. That's left over from the original design, which had a decompression system in this particular cover. And I think it would have been nice if they just kept that, because it certainly would have been easier on the electric starters. Anyway, they kept the 4-bolt one, or at least they didn't change the castings on this anyway. But this engine is a 360-degree twin. I'm going to show you a little trick here so that you know which side you're going to be adjusting. If you are at the top center mark, like I am right now, now watch those valves as I rock the engine here back and forth. Okay, when I move the crank in the direction of rotation, exhaust is just closing. See that? And intake is just opening. So when you see that, if you see exhaust just closing and the intake just opening on any 360-degree twin, you know that the opposite side is the one that you're going to be doing the valve adjustments on first, because that side will be at the top of right on the firing stroke. So valves will be closed. That's where you do your checks. It doesn't work on a 180-degree twin. You have to do it a little bit differently on those, but there is a trick. If you get to the point on a 180 or 270-degree twin where the valves are rocking like that, then you know you have to turn the crank 360 degrees in order to do it. And at least, one full turn, because you're at the top of the compression stroke, right where the engine would fire. So you want to go around a whole turn more to get to the point where the valves are both unloaded, right? So the cams will be unloaded at that point, and that's where you want to check your valve lash. So I'm about to check the valve lash over here on the left-hand side, and I do have some clearance. You can wiggle the valves around. I'm not sure what the clearances are. I think they're 4 and 6, but don't quote me on that. I'm going to go look in the book and make sure I'm right before I do any kind of measurements or adjusting. I was wrong. I'm glad I checked the book. It's not 4 and 6. That's for the later model bikes. This one is a 75, so it's an XS650B. This is 2, this is 4. So I'm going to get my feeler gauges out and adjust the valves, or check the adjustment at least anyway. And but 2 thou, 4 thou for this particular model. Check your book for the model you're working on. Like if you have a later model, it might be the wider clearances. It might be 4 and 6. Anyhow, I'm going to check that out right now, and I'll let you know what I've got after I do that. Okay, this intake valve here, the 2 thou one, just fits under there. Kind of hard to do it with one hand, but see if I can get it to slip in under there. Yeah, it just goes in there, and you can pull it out and you can just feel it drag. So that's 2 thou there. This one here, though, it's supposed to be 4. 4 is quite loose in there. You can get, bear with me here, like I say, I'm working one-handed. I can get the 6 thou in under there quite easily. So this one I will adjust a little bit, bring that back down to 4 thou, where it's supposed to be. The bike was not noisy in terms of valve noise anyway, but I don't check the valves very often, so it doesn't hurt to change them when you do have them apart. So like I say, just a little small adjustment on that exhaust valve here on this side. Then I'll roll the engine over 360 degrees and we'll do the other side. I'll just let you know what I find when I go. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up for the Yamaha tune-up. I've got the valve covers back in place and all tightened up. There's fresh oil in the engine there, so that's looked after. The only thing that I still want to do is get the bike out maybe tomorrow, the next day, get her good warmed up, come back and just adjust the pilot circuits a little tiny bit on the carburetors. I don't think they need it. It's just something I want to do so that I know it's running at peak performance. About the brass covers, the valve covers there were cast for me by a good friend of mine years ago, probably about 1979, maybe 1980. He was taking a foundry molding course at the local vocational school down in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and he cast those valve covers for me. The other covers were machined out of solid brass, like that one on the side, and the other one that's on the oil filter. But anyway, that's about it. Next thing up on the list is going to be that Norton ES2, and I will do a tune-up on that. While this old Yamaha is up here, I think I'm going to give it a good cleaning since it's up higher and easier to get at. So I'll get her all scrubbed off and ready for the season. And so thanks for watching. Be good to each other. And next time it'll be the ES2, unless something else comes up. Thanks for watching.